symbiotic hepatitis. Nash had a beautiful mind, including schizophrenia. So for innovation, creativity, and keen monitoring is essential. Phototherapy was invented. The key was a staff nurse who observed meticulously that babies kept in sunlight had less jaundice. Right? And there were no kangaroos in Bogota, Colombia. Still, we had a KMC from Bogota, Colombia. So it all needs creativity and curiosity for proper innovation. So we need not aim the best for everything. So in India, we need a spark for the young neonatologist. And I'm sure we have the spark here. Welcome, sir. Over to Professor, sir.
Thank you very much. You have made my job easier by sharing some of my thoughts at the start of the, but you will notice that I changed the title. And you'll come back, when I come back to the end of this session, you will realize why I changed it. So as Dr. Adishivam said that, this phototherapy came from a very interesting observation by this lady in the 50s. She was a nurse, Jean Ward, who loved taking children out into the sun because she felt the sun and fresh air did them good. But she also noticed that babies who went out in the sun were less yellow than the ones who didn't go. And she quite forgot about it. A couple of days later, the pathologist there told the doctor in charge, I'm sorry, I couldn't give you a report. I found some differences because I had left the vial on the windowsill. It got exposed to sun, and I found it had changed color. And I've got a completely different bilirubin value than what I had estimated earlier. That was the start of the process of good observation that led to phototherapy. It's not that phototherapy didn't exist. Phototherapy existed from the 19th century. It was used largely for dermatological, like psoriasis and acne, but its use in newborn was after this thought process came through. So what is innovation? It can be new ideas put into practice. It can also be existing ideas put into practice in newer ways. So please remember that you may be doing something for a long time, but if you do it in a different way, it is still innovation, right? He talked about these two gentlemen, 1970s in Bogota. They had a pressing need. They had, I don't know how many of you know that the hospital in Bogota was the only pediatric hospital for the entire country in the 60s and 70s. So every newborn, or rather a newborn who needed hospitalization, had to come to this hospital in Bogota, which means they were just flooded with newborns. And they didn't have the wherewithal to look after them. They just simply didn't have. Colombia was a poor country in those days, and they didn't have enough resources to be able to provide them all the warmth and so on. And so that was the genesis of skin-to-skin contact and kangaroo mother care, initiating breastfeeding, early discharge. We didn't provide KMC, but we also in this country, remember, sent home our babies in the 60s and 70s early, planned early discharge. Because we also had the same problem. We just simply didn't have enough beds to look after them. I don't know, of course, whether our growth restriction rates were similar across Bogota and here, but one of the advantages that we had at that time was that we had far more babies who were small but actually growth retarded. So we had an advantage of maturity. And so once we knew that they could feed, we felt they're good enough to be sent home. And so that's not what we all did. So what started as a necessity because circumstances has gradually evolved into standard of care. And so today we have KMC. So one may ask, what is innovation? Is it a product? the service or a process? If you look at KMC, it's all. It's a product, right? It's a product, means you have a device for it, you can put, and you create a product, right? It's also a service because it doesn't stop just by providing this, right? It's a service that continues not only inside the hospital, it continues beyond. There's a method of tracking these children to get back to the emergency if they have a problem, look at the growth and development, and the whole thing runs into a process. So therefore, innovation can be a combination of several of these things, right? How many of us have attempted to create a blender when you don't have a formal blender? I think many parts of this country still suffer from the fact that you don't have blenders and you still deliver oxygen at very high concentrations, right? So this is not very old. So Cambodia had that problem. And so Cambodia, the Institute of Pediatrics at Cambodia, collaborated with the University of Minnesota. So the critical care unit and the biodesign unit at Minnesota came up with this low-cost blender called LESS, which actually is a low-cost, and they use a syringe. How they used the syringe and the amount it could open, and with the Venturi effect, you could control the FiO2. Didn't require much. It's an online system that was created. Of course, even though they had created, this is something that I had worked with the Department of Biomedical Engineering way back in the early 90s, where we had devised a similar system, except that we never went into a production line. But this is something that was done because there was a felt need by physicians that they need to do something, and it was not acceptable that in the 21st century that you are going to create ROP and other problems for babies who are receiving CPAP, right? We face this problem every day. Tapes across babies' cheeks, trying to keep the endotracheal tube in place, having a feeding tube go through that, having one to do suction. And this was devised in this country way back in the early 90s using a workshop design system where you could see that it's very simply a plastic where the endotracheal tube get fixed. You have a suction, a feeding tube, and then a space for a suction. Sadly enough, this product did not actually convert itself into a, but all these people were physicians who felt there was a problem. You know what this is? I don't know, many of our younger people may not even have seen this. We all have intracats with different colors. But have you ever seen infusion lines with different colors? And the people who face the maximum problems in critical care units of trying to deliver multiple drugs are nurses. So Barton Selena and a sister who used to work in an intensive care, adult intensive care unit, and they were always troubled with this confusion of trying to know which line is having what going through it. And so they actually patented this and became entrepreneurs. And they started a company, right? But remember, nurses are the ones, in my opinion, who are innovating every day. Every day of their work, they are trying to innovate. The only difference is that the innovations they carry are to make their job simpler. It doesn't necessarily get translated into something. They don't even advertise it, translate it, how it will get impact the larger community of neonatal care, right? Have any of you seen this battery solar power incubator? Wissam Biggie was a parent when the Gulf War was going on. His wife delivered preterm. The hospital in those days with Gulf War, power outages. So in his own words, he had to bring his wife back to the car, start up the car engine and keep it warm so that the baby didn't become hypothermic. After the Gulf War or thereabouts, Biggie went to the US, where this problem kept bothering him. And he was an entrepreneur, and he developed this solar power incubator, and his company now produces this low-cost incubator, which can be placed in many places, especially if you are in places where there is war and famine, whatever else. These are difficult areas where you can use it. So remember, parents too can be innovators. So the bottom line is a whole range of people can contribute to an ideation or all actually convert into something that's needed, okay? So the bottom question is, how do you create this innovative thinking? The first is observe and listen. If you're a NICU, you need to listen to many, many people. You have the family, the baby, yourself, your colleagues, nurses, technicians, janitors, whoever they are. When we began our work on room air, the origin was not science. We used to have tremendous problems in the 80s, oxygen. I mean, I'm sure we all faced it. District hospitals, it's almost not there. Even in big hospitals, those bulk cylinders, transporting them, they finished, the technicians used to sweat under the burden of trying to move bulk cylinders to try and so this whole question of 100% oxygen was a challenge. And during those days, I was deeply involved in training traditional birth attendants in providing mouth-to-mouth or mouth-to-mask or just simply bag and mask. And we knew the baby was surviving. So the question we asked ourselves was, you have oxygen as a problem. On the other hand, we have room air or even expired air, which is even less than 21%, but babies are doing well. So why do you need 100%? In those days, we didn't quite understand this, the chemistry of what happened. Of course, it was a problem we worked on. So the genesis of this room air came out of necessity because oxygen was always difficult to get. Of course, subsequently, there's a science to back up what we did, but that's become standard of care over time. So the first key, if you want to create innovative thinking, is to create an environment that values all voices. Right? Second, you must be able to thank people for their ideas, suggestions, their participation in what you do, in whatever happens. So they feel good about it. So if you want people to continue to contribute, to make sure they all feel part of this process, which leads to the transformation, right? So it's very important. So you must recognize and appreciate people for what little they do. If you have a nurse who finds a solution for small things, you must be able to thank her. I was in Madhya Pradesh as part of an initiative we are doing on quality care, and I was at one of the SNCUs in the state. And I had been told by the Secretary of Health that that unit had had huge mortality just 2 months ago, and he wanted me to go and have a look and check up what's happening. So I reached there about 3 months after the incident. And I found that I looked at a preliminary report that somebody had submitted, which shows that there were doubling and tripling of newborns, and so on and so forth. But to my surprise, when I went there, I found no baby was doubled or tripled, all single, neat, spick and span. Every baby sheet had every baby bed had a neat monitoring chart being recorded. So I was wondering what happened. And I was introduced to a sister in charge who had just taken over after this incident. So she did a very simple thing. She found that there was a room on the other side of the nursery. It was a door, probably some part of the old maternity ward, not being used, but it had a door which was permanently locked. She had it opened, and she put 6 beds there for mothers and started transferring all those babies who were stable enough to go to KMC in that area. And she made sure that there was no doubling. She made sure that she laid down a protocol of how monitoring needs to be done. And she rigorously monitored herself by random checks. And she also ensured that no baby got drugs which expired. So she made sure in every room which had about 6 warders, all the drugs of a particular drug had same expiry date. You would not find an ampicillin, one vial, one for expiring in May of this year, another December. No. She said in that room for that drug, every drug has a common expiry. So she knew what's happening. So the risk of, she didn't leave it, it was not left to the nurse to worry about whether it's expired or not. They had a checklist to say, okay, the date has arrived, so the whole lot was picked up and removed. So she minimized this likelihood of error by doing something very simple. And that unit today is doing very well. So it didn't require very much, just simple reorganization, little innovation. So so you need to thank people for this brilliant ideas that they do over there. You need to talk to people. You need to talk to everyone. I don't know how many of the residents nowadays sit over a cup of tea with your nurses. This was our routine. We used to either early morning before we began, or most often around 11, midway between rounds being finished and doing something else, sit with the nurses, listen to the sob stories, but also listen to problems. And some of them had good ideas of what we think we should do. And one of the things that I found most useful, so in those days we used to have a room where our mothers could sleep overnight, because the postnatal ward, not very far, but we felt it was not fair for them to keep coming in the night for breastfeeding the babies. So this was a room which was adjacent to our duty room. The top half was not covered, so you could overhear. It was fascinating to listen to the conversation between parents, the mothers. It told you what things you're not doing correctly, but it also told us about some problems that they were experiencing. And I used a lot of those ideas to bring about changes of what we did. So please make sure you encourage communication and free information flow in your unit if you want people to start thinking and be innovative and solve problems. You need to connect with people who can help. Obviously, you can't, if you look at the low blender, it's not possible I need an engineer who can do something. I may need a scientist who can look at something. I may need a data analyst who can compute some algorithms for me. So there may be many people. So you must be able to connect with people who can help transform your ideation into something meaningful that can be put into clinical practice. And you should be willing to collaborate with institutions within the country, outside. And a great example is the Mira Cradle. The Mira Cradle was something that was a necessity. We did something low cost, but the Biodesign Center at CMC with the clinicians developed it. And then they collaborated with the industry to get into product. And then they collaborated with the university in Norway to do some randomized controlled trials to see how it works. So it's very, very important to encourage diversity and networking. Talking about phase change, we have done for cooling, right? Professor Girish Gupta, who was Surgeon Admiral Girish Gupta, who was in the Navy, actually used way back in the 90s phase change for rivers, for heating babies. He actually developed a transportation system where within the armed forces, he was using this phase change material for transporting babies so they didn't become hypothermic. So phase change can be used anyway. And just to let you know, that ET tube fixator was something he had devised while he was in the Army, but he never, of course, the Army has his own problems about commercializing any product. So it never happened. So please encourage diversity, keep a networking going, human network with many people, for you to be able to convert your idea into something wonderful. Of course, it's not enough. You must have the curiosity to try to solve problems. You must look ahead of saying what may happen. You must be able to reflect through situation that you're in, and then come some creative ideas. So you need to have some of these qualities within us to encourage people to wear the thinking cap. That's what you need to do. You need to encourage people. As a leader in your NICU, you need to encourage people to wear the thinking cap. But it's not a Midas wand. You put a cap and the idea will come through. It doesn't happen that way, does it? You have to teach them. You have to show them how to do things. You have to make them do it, to make sure they've understood what you have demonstrated as said actually is internalized by them. And you continue to handhold them. Means you have to be a good mentor if you have to create this culture of thinking differently, right? Any ideation which needs to be translated into an implementation needs a plan. And then you decide how to implement it. Then you review the progress of this implementation. And once you've sorted out all the nuts and bolts, so it works, then you say, okay, this becomes how to make it happen as a regular basis. And so it's critical to be inclusive. That means all people, right from ideation to implementation, must be part of the journey if you want to make that happen, right? This is a question I have to my young friends. If I ask you this question, how to provide CPAP to a baby when I do not have bubble CPAP, mechanical ventilator, influent throat driver, what are you going to do? And if you tell me what is your answer to this question, if I pose this, if you're in a situation where you don't have all this, how will you provide CPAP? Yeah? Any ideas? Yeah, louder? Sorry, I can't hear you. So you do indigenize, do something, pick up whatever you have and create one. What do you think will happen if I was to put this question on the net? It will tell you, you cannot provide CPAP. That's what it'll tell you. Because AI doesn't think like you. AI is only as good as how much information is fed into it, right? The human mind is, in my opinion, I've always believed that AI can never replace human minds. Human minds are always several steps ahead. So this is not correct. Let me change the question. If you say how to provide indigenous CPAP to a newborn baby, you will get the answer you asked to what you just now said, right? It'll tell you what to do. And it'll give you all the steps, what all material you need, how do you set up. So this is the right question. So the first most important thing for any innovation is ask the right question. This is the key. If you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right answer. And all the remaining 7 things I said. So this 8-point mantra are the key things that will help you develop an innovative culture in the minds of people who work with you. So which is the right question? This was what I was asked to speak on originally. How to inculcate a culture of innovative thinking among neonatologists. But I changed it to say how to inculcate a culture of innovative thinking in the NICU. So you need to remember, the first is a question, but the second is a better question because it brings in many more people who are involved, who are actually contribute to innovations in newborn care. And so I leave it at this point of time with the thoughts that I've just shared with you. We're always innovating. Remember one thing, we're always problem solving every day. It's only a question of saying, look for it, it's there. Is there a better way of doing things? Is there a solution to this which I don't have, right? So everything has small beginnings, small steps, small ideation, and then keeps going on. There are huge examples. I think India, if you look at newborn care, India has been in the forefront. We may not have contributed too much in terms of technology, but remember, India was the first country in the world to actually initiate a nationwide newborn care program as a dedicated effort to bring down our mortality. We have created health systems which the rest of the world look forward to. We have 1,000+ SNCUs currently, right? Lakhs of babies are being cared for. There's a constant effort of trying to improve, right? Now we do ROPs in SNCUs. Whoever thought that a district hospital would do ROPs? Whoever thought that we'll do hearing screening and I know new SNCUs ventilate babies, and they've graduated from a secondary level to a tertiary level. So I'll stop here and hope that these small little things that we have all learned in a long journey for newborn care will help all of you to become innovative and also encourage the others with whom you interact to contribute to the innovations for newborn care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful insights into innovative thinking inside NICU. So I'm sure the budding neonatologists here would have been excited. And if there are a few couple of questions, you can shoot.
I think very interesting talk. I am sure that the young minds would have got stimulated. To further stimulate it, do you think our curriculum needs some changes to inculcate this innovative idea into the mind? Because now we are going from the real patient to the skill labs. So whether anything we should need to look in so that the innovative ideas will come. Only when the problem comes, as you say, your idea will come. But if you don't have a situation, how the ideas come?
You're very right. I don't think, curriculums can be designed to be innovative. I don't think skills lab are the solution to that. But I think that innovativeness has to come through an undergraduate program where you see a variety of things and somebody must be able to ask them, okay, here's a problem. Tell me how. So unless we train our people into problem solving, which I think is the first step to innovative thinking. Innovative thinking is a problem solving exercise, which leads to a solution, right? The problem solving. So unless we train our young minds to do problem solving, I don't think it's going to happen. So we have a curriculum. As I said, medicine doesn't have to follow a curriculum. It's a question of how well we as teachers and mentors actually stimulate. I've always believed that, we are spending too much time in the classrooms. We should be spending 80% of times on the floor of the wards in the hospitals and OPDs and emergencies, where they see the real world. and there is somebody who asks them these questions, which I think is a difference that people like you and me and the current generation miss. We spent a lot of our times after 5 o'clock in the wards, in the emergencies, and we are constantly probed by our senior postgraduates, senior residents, saying, why is this happening? So we are always forced to think. And then we always lived in a world where we didn't have resources. So we had to find innovative solutions of how to take care of patients. So I think it's the question of how we mentor them, how we change the way we interact with them, right? And so the same is true for postgraduate training. I think this is something that we as consultants should ask that question to them and saying, okay, doesn't matter, you don't have it. So what would you do? Everybody is not going to eventually land up and work in CMC or JIPMER or in AIMS. You're going to go into peripheral areas where you'll be challenged by limitation of resources. So I think that's some of the things that you need to look at. I mean, I can tell you in my vast experience that many pediatricians at district hospitals in this country actually had started finding solutions to problems much before our SNCUs took off the way they are, right? They were looking up newborns even then, but they did fine. So I think it's a question of how we mentor them, how we ask them to find solutions. And to me, good nurses are the best stimulus to make you think. They really probe you. I remember when we were students and my consultant would rather listen to the nurse than me about whether baby should be discharged or not. I would say, sir, let's go discharge kar dijiye. She would say, no, not at all. On the other hand, I felt this baby should be discharged. She will say, no. I should sit with her and ask her, please tell me. Because they spend so many hours. We also spend hours, but they're observing something. And she says, you know, I'm not only observing the baby, I'm also observing whether her mother is ready. The baby may be ready, but the mother is not ready. So if you send this baby, he'll be back in 2 days' time. So there was great learning for us in saying that if you find a solution, it's not just that individual. There is an ecosystem around which you need to understand. And I think they become very potent stimuli for us to think. That's why I said you need to spend time with families, listen to their problems, sit with nurses, sit with your technicians. They all have problems. You should be accessible to them without being judgmental. That's very important.
Any further questions? I'm sure many ideas will be still incubating. They will hatch out one day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a deeply stimulating and walking us through the inculcating culture of innovations. I request Dr. Siddarth Ramji, sir, to join the judges podium for the next protocol presentation. For judging the next session on protocol presentations, we have with us Dr. Siddarth Ramji, sir, Dr. Adi Sivam, sir, and Dr. Shobna, ma'am. Dr. Shobna, ma'am, is the senior consultant of in Department of Neonatology in Rainbow Children's Hospital.